Well, hello everybody, welcome to Coding 101. My name is Skutla. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you about one of the important React hooks, which is called the useContext hook. Many of you might be familiar with this hook. Of course, I've used it in one of my previous projects, and as I say this, I'm hoping that you've watched my previous video regarding the Wordle application. It's very important. Make sure that you check that out. But before you look at it, you might want to go through this video first. We're going to be learning about the useContext hook. It's a very important hook that is very important in passing your data or your state throughout the component tree without having to prop drill. And if you don't know about prop drilling, I'm going to be explaining to you that in a moment. So React provides these useful hooks in order to make your programming life easy. And the useContext hook is such a hook that will definitely make your coding life much easier. Alright, let's get into understanding what the useContext hook is. But before we do that, once again, I would like to encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Make sure that you like this video, and if you have any questions or if you have any comments, make sure that you leave them in the comments section. So the useContext hook, really, it makes it easy to pass data throughout your app without having to manually pass props down a tree. So let's say, for example, I'm going to pull out my Paint thing over here. Let's say, for example, you have components. This is your parent component over here, and we're going to call this component A, and then it has children in its components. It has maybe component, we'll call this one component A1, and then it has another child, and then maybe we'll call this one component A2. So these two components are children of that A component that you see over there. And then these components by themselves, they also have children of their own. So we're going to create a child over here, and we're going to create another child for A2 over here. So we can call this one A11, A11, and this one we can call it A21. So this is the parent component over here, and of course it gives birth to these other components that you see. So these are its children component. So now let's say maybe you have a state over here in your parent component. Let's say you have a state. Let's try to lower down our font to maybe font 20. So I'm going to put it over here. You have maybe a state, and that state is called a counter. Right, so you have a state, and it's called counter. So that is your state, and what I want to do is that I want to be able to share my state across all these components inside of here. Let's say, for example, I want that at the end of the day, what I want to happen is that this state that I have over here is able to go down to my component over there. So it is able to go to A21. So there has to be a way for me to share the state that is at the top parent component and be able to share it to essentially it's the grandchild component. So in order to do that, first you would have to use props. And so what props do is that I would have to, the first thing that I need to do in order to share my state with the grandchildren, share this counter state with the A21 component, what I would first need to do is that I would need to share my state with A2, and then after that, A2 would then have the responsibility to pass that state to the child component. So there is no way of this A component directly passing on the state to the A21 state unless the A21 state is the direct child of the A state. So let me give another similar example. Let's say maybe over here you have a state, and this state, I'm going to call this state name. So is this going to be name? So this is a state, and the state is called name. And what I want to do, once again, is that I want to be able to share my state with this A11 component. But I can't really do that. I can't share my state with the A11 component because I have no direct relationship with the A11. In order for me to be able to share that component or to share my state with the A11 component, I would need to first the first thing that I would need to do, the first thing that I would need to do is that I would need to share this state with A1, and then if A1 chooses to, they can share that state with A11. So this is where the use context hook comes in. The use context hook enables us to be able to share our state, it enables the parent state to share their state with everything that is under it. So this is called a component tree. So a use context hook provides a way to pass data or state through the component tree without having to pass props down manually through each nested component. So it is designed to share data that can be considered as a global data for a tree of React components. So this is how the use context hook is essentially important. So in use context, there is such a thing as a consumer component and a provider component. So a provider component, in our case, would be this A state that we are seeing over here. So the A component, the A component would be considered a provider component. And the reason why it is a provider is because it is the one responsible for providing the information that is going to be passed to all these other components. So the good thing about the use component hook is that if this component further extends its tree downwards, every single component in the tree will be able to share in that data. So that is why the use context hook is important. So the A component therefore becomes the provider, and every component that makes use of the information that is passed on from the A component is called a consumer. So what we're going to do right now is that we're going to look at our to-do list application that we had created before. You will notice that before, what we had to do is that we had to share some of these things, some of these functionalities, by means of using a prop. So I'm just going to get rid of this terminal over here, and I'm going to go to my to-do list application. Just give me a moment. So this is our to-do list application over there. And so in order to share some of these functionalities or some of these props that we're seeing over here, or some of this state or information, we had to use props. But if we had a use context hook implemented over here, there is no need for us to be using props. So that is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to create a use context hook. So of course, the first thing that we need to do is to create the context. So, and we want to create it at the very top over here. So we're going to just say to do context. So this is essentially where the information is going to be stored, essentially. And then we're just going to say create context. And if we do that, you'll notice that create context is imported at the very top like that. I'm just going to say const. That should suffice. So now we've successfully created our context. But hold on, we're not done yet. We need to indicate that this thing over here is a provider. And in order to do that, what we would need to do is that we would need to come over here and we would just say to do context like that dot provider, and then we're going to take everything that we have over here and we're going to just put it inside of the provider as such. And then anything that we would need to share with the rest of our component tree, we would just put it under this attribute inside of the provider called value. So in our case, what we simply want to do is that we want to share the items list. So that's the only thing we're going to be sharing in this tutorial. You can also share functions if you want to. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to say items list like that. And just like that, we've managed to share our state with the rest of the components that is underneath this component tree. So I think I may need to give it an extra curly brackets in there. I think that will suffice. And also at the same time, you can also share these functions that we have over here. It's just to show you that you can share functions as well. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to do header. I'm going to go to the components that these values, or these states are used. The state and the function is used essentially. So I'm going to check the to-do header. So there's the add item. So this is where the add item is used. So now, in order to use it, what I would need to do is that I would come over here and I would get that context. So the first thing that I would need to do is to import use context at the top like this. Alright. And I would need to import that context. Remember, it's called to do context. I'm just going to type it here so that it can just import automatically. And I'm going to say use context, wrap it around use context. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use the destructuring to get those values that we had shared. Remember, those values is add item and items list. We're going to first start with add item. So come over here to the header and maybe items list as well. But I'm seeing that in this case, there's no really any need to use items list. The only thing that is needed here is the add item functionality. So we've managed to import it from the use context hook. So what we can do now is that we can get rid of this prop because we don't need it anymore. We already have the add item. And I'm also going to get rid of it over here as well. And what we expect to happen is that if we add an item, it should work accordingly. Let's just make sure everything is good in the to-do header. Make sure that this is a small letter U. Add item, that's fine. And actually, you could see that it's grayed out. That means we didn't put it correctly. So it's supposed to be add item, not add items. So this should be fine. And now if we go to our project, what we expect to happen is that if we were to add something over here, so let's just refresh it. So I'm going to just say go on a date. And then if I click submit, you could see that the add item function works appropriately because of that use context hook. So we didn't use props this time around, we just used a use context hook. So let's try and do the same thing with items list. We don't actually need to pass it as a prop, so let's go to our to-do list application, and instead of passing it down as a prop, we can just use context. So we'll just do it like this. We'll just say item list equals use context, and then to do context like that. And then instead of passing it as a prop, I'm going to get rid of it over there, and it's going to be used appropriately. So now we don't actually need that in there. And if we go to our project, you can see that it renders appropriately. You can just refresh so that you can just see that the list is rendered appropriately and nothing is breaking. So you can see the importance of the use context hook. We can even go even further and add this delete item as well. So why not? Let's not put it aside. You can just say delete item like that. Get rid of the props. Delete item. And then come over here to to-do list and just say delete item. Like this. And if we go back to our project, but before we do, of course, let's go to to-do list and get rid of this prop that you have over there. And if we go to our project and try and delete something, you can see that it's deleted appropriately. So that is how to use context in the context, see what I did there, in the context of our to-do list application. So it's as simple as that. I hope that now you know how to use context without having to prop drill your state. It's much more easy and much more convenient. I think the next time we will learn about Redux, which is similar to use context, but it is much more flexible than use context. So thank you so much for watching. Please make sure that you have subscribed to the channel and make sure that you like the video. I will see you next time on Coding 101.